console, online. HPG connection, online. Educational module, online. All systems, nominal.
Hello, class, and welcome to On the Origin of Battlemechs Podcast, episode 36. I am your host, Brent Stewart McKee. My co-hosts today are...
I'm Joshua.
And I'm Chandler.
And today we're going to talk about the Guillotine, a classic and robust and respected chassis that weighs in at around 70 tons, and it's just a respected machine that you will find on the battlefield.
Respect.
So the Guillotine, of course, takes its name from the device designed, built, and used during Terra's French Revolutionary period. The machine it takes its name from, of course, was designed to execute persons by removing their head from their bodies, and the Guillotine lives up to its namesake, as since its initial introduction it has been a machine feared and respected on the battlefield. The Guillotine mech was produced by the Terran Hegemony and quickly became a staple of the HAF, and then the SLDF. The Guillotine will often provide support to more mobile units and has incredible resilience as a mech.
Viva la revolution.
I believe 70 tons is a pretty good spot for heavy mechs. This guy's got that default 4.6 profile, which maximizes the tonnage available for weapons and armor.
Mm-hmm.
It's got the nice shiny jump jets to go from point A to point B without having to dirty its feet.
So the Guillotine has the design quirks of having a searchlight, which is very easy to pick out on the mech, as it's sitting right there, kind of over top of everything, and I love this machine, but the old art kind of has the cockpit smooshed into the top of the torso with the big searchlight behind it, and it looks kind of goofy to me.
I don't want to imagine what ejecting from this thing is like.
Oh my god, I always thought that was the SRM pack.
No, that's the searchlight.
It's even worse.
Like, it's just on, like, 3 joists, chunks of armor, I don't know even what you want to call those, up there, and the new design looks really good in my opinion, because it takes the cockpit from kind of being smushed in between the shoulders, where I kind of feel like the armor, the way it's angled, would channel fire towards the cockpit, which seems like a bad design, and they have moved the cockpit forward and kind of a little bit down, so it looks much more streamlined and smoothed and doesn't look quite rammed in there.
It's such a derpy searchlight. I'll never be able to look at this mech the same way again.
Yeah. This guy's got a torso-mounted cockpit without actually having a torso-mounted cockpit.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Although that's very common with a lot of the earlier designs.
This is true.
I mean, look at the Archer. That's way down there. It's like right at the hip almost.
But at least that one sticks out really far in the front.
That's true, but
yeah.
That's enough about mechs that aren't guillotines.
So we have the 3N first, and it's got a movement profile of 4.64. It's got an SRM-6 in the center torso, a medium laser in the right torso, a medium laser in the left torso, 2 medium lasers in the right arm, and a large laser in the left arm. It's got 25 heat sinks, and it's got endo steel, and it is a cool piece of kit. The ammo for the SRM is protected by a case. Yeah, it's just really well armored, well balanced. It's a very solid machine.
Yeah, I like the fact it doesn't use an XL engine and still manages to pack in decent amount of firepower.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, not quite as much as a Thunderbolt, though.
No, the Thunderbolt is a high watermark, so it's if you can contend with it, you're doing all right.
Yeah, it tends to have a little bit more mobility than the earlier Thunderbolts it would have been contending with, so, trade-offs. You're sticking that tonnage that you would put another gun on, or more armor for, into jump jets, which, depending on how you're piloting this bad boy, can turn this from a slightly lopsided fight to a one-hit KO if you're able to get right behind him.
Oh yeah. So the 3N was first seen in 24.99, and it's got a battle value of 14.18 and a point value of 35. And then this guy is followed up. Normally we do the primitives to the standard tech. We're going a little backwards here because the 4L is actually a downgrade due to the loss of tech with the Succession Wars that affected the performance very little, considering it was first introduced in 2825, and this guy's got an SRM-6 in the center torso, medium laser in the right torso and left torso, medium laser in the right arm, 2 of them, and a large laser. Still keeps that movement profile of 464, and it's got 22 heat sinks, and of course it's going to lose the case and the endo steel, so making up the weight there with the heat sinks.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the key reason why the 4L is not that much worse than the 3N, is because the 3N is already using a standard engine. So, the way endo steel works, you're only losing, 3-4 tons of usable space going from endo steel to standard on a 70-ton mech. So you give up 3 heat sinks and a half ton of case, and there you go. Nothing else has to change.
Just a couple little tweaks, downgrading or taking out some tech, and you're good. It's not ideal, but, when you're in the Succession Wars, you do what you got to do.
Yeah, the sacrifices that the Succession Wars caused didn't affect the Guillotine all too bad. I mean, could have been a lot worse.
Yeah.
And I mean, I question the need for all 25 heat sinks. I mean, I guess that lets you run perfectly heat neutral, but, the loadout here...
If you run and fire everything on the 3N, you still generate 1 heat, which isn't anything like, oh no, 1 heat. But, I mean, if you jump and fire everything, then you're starting to generate a decent amount of heat afterwards, and the 4L just exasperates the jumping and firing problem, which you just don't fire some of your medium lasers, I guess. But yeah, it's a thought.
Yeah.
That being said, this thing is still very respectable, and I'd be willing to take a bit of a spike of heat if I could jump into someone's rear arc and just take them out.
Yeah. It doesn't really seem to be like a huge deal to me, so...
Mm-hmm. It's definitely one of those things you gotta watch, though, especially as you're running around the battlefield, because obviously this guy wants to get in pretty close with just having the 1 large laser as a long-range weapon and everything else capping out at 9.
I mean, the fact that they're so close in performance is borne out by their BV and PV costs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this guy's got a BV of 1400 flat and a point value of 35. So between the Alpha Strike, there's really no difference.
And it's only 18 points of BV between the classic Battletech versions, which is 18 points is nothing.
Yeah, that's very small. So after that, we get the 4P. This is a model that many were apprehensive to commit to, despite its purpose being to resolve minor issues from previous models, specifically the issue with the large laser. And it swaps out the large laser for a PPC and keeps everything else the same from the 4L. So it's still got the 22 heat sinks, still got the 4 medium lasers exactly where they were in the other model, the SRM-6, same movement profile, just swapping a PPC.
Yeah, you drop 2 tons of armor.
A little more heat issues.
Yeah.
Honestly,
I probably would have just ditched the 2 torso-mounted medium lasers for the PPC weight savings requirement, rather than ditch 2 tons of armor. But I see where they're going with it, because it's probably a lot easier to redesign it to just drop armor and refit the large laser to be a PPC.
Mm-hmm.
But massive heat issues compared to the other ones, with that PPC generating 10 compared to the 8.
Oh yeah,
it just exasperates the problem. But not a bad mech by any means. It just kind of lessens its all-rounder abilities compared to the large laser.
Yeah, it feels like a bit of an overcorrection for a minor problem. So this guy was first seen in 2833, and he's got a battle value of 1376 and a point value of 34.
Whoa. What do we have in next? That's not a standard guillotine nomenclature there.
No, it is not. We're going to jump forward and out into the far deep periphery for a little bit, because we've got the Guillotine 2C. And of course, the Guillotine 2C is a 2C version, but because there are only 2 models, we're going to include it with the rest of the Guillotine. Sometimes that will happen, and sometimes the 2Cs will get their own episodes, really depending on how many models there are, because sometimes there's 1 or 2, sometimes there's a whole bunch.
And this one's nice for our purposes because a lot of the 2Cs will fall much later in the timeline when the clans start coming back to invade the Inner Sphere. But this guy drops in 2889, which is in almost 160 years before the clan invasion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and This mech was introduced before Omni-mechs were a thing, but then quickly got sidelined due to Omni-mechs becoming, all the rage because of their fancy-dancy technology.
Yeah, so this guy was developed by Clan Coyote, who, when in need of a second-line mech, chose to rebuild the Guillotine from the ground up using clan tech. The clans with the largest number of these machines are Clan Star Adder, Cloud Cobra, and Coyote. And this guy is still 70 tons. Sometimes with the 2Cs you'll get a different tonnage, but here we're keeping steady at 70. It's got a movement profile of 464. It's got the SRM-6 in the center torso, ER medium laser in the right torso, an ER medium laser in the left torso, 2 large pulse lasers in the right arm, and an ER PPC in the left arm. It's got endo steel. It's got 16 double heat sinks. It's got a ton of nice toys, and it looks great.
And that's the reason why it stayed 70 tons, because it's a nice mech to begin with. And with the development of Clan Endosteel, they were able to rebuild the chassis with half the space cost of standard Intersphere Endosteel, which is what gives them the room to put all those double heat sinks in. And then on top of that, bumping the large laser to a clan ERPPC not only massively increases the range on it, but almost doubles your firepower for that weapon, going from 8 points of damage to 15.
It's definitely a much more dangerous mech, and that shows in the BV value almost, more than doubles.
Yeah. It also bumps the arm lasers up to those large pulse lasers, which give you significantly more range than the old medium lasers, on top of a lot more firepower, on top of better accuracy. So this is a brutal heavy mech.
A mean killing machine. This is not something you want to run into.
Yeah, he doesn't want to wade right into the thick of it with those 3 long-range weapon systems, but he's happy to just lumber along, shooting as he goes, supporting his lance mates or star mates.
He's still got that same movement profile, so he's not really lumbering.
No, that's true.
Compared to later clan heavies, he does kind of lumber, but this is an early clan tech heavy mech, so he's well within his movement rights.
And a lot of those faster clan heavies will be using XL and trading some of their survivability, whereas this Guillotine 2C is still using a standard engine.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think it's also worth noting that this is the first Guillotine that can really live up to its name, because that clan ERPPC lets it actually head cap people.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So it's got a battle value of 2377 and a point value of 41. After that, we're going to jump back over to the inner sphere, and we're also going to jump forward in time to 3049 with the first model to have capabilities that surpass the 3N, the 5M. And this guy has the same movement profile. It's got SRM-6 in the center torso, the medium laser in the right and the left torso, 2 medium lasers in the right arm, and it's got an ER large laser in the left arm. It's got endo steel, has the case again, and it's got 25 single heat sinks. So this guy is, just the 3N, only a little bit better because it's got an ER large laser now.
Yeah.
Yeah, the big problem for this guy, though, is he doesn't upgrade the
heat
sinks.
Yeah.
So he's running a little even warmer. Although, like we talked earlier, the 3N didn't run terribly warm, so...
Yeah, he just has to worry if he's getting in close and alphaing.
But his battle value is 1472, and his point value is 35, and definitely goes back to that skirmisher role, if it really ever left it. And after that, we're going to skip forward again a couple years to the 3062 model, the 8D, and this was produced during the FedCom Civil War. And of course, D for Davian.
Are you sure? I'm not seeing any autocannons on this guy.
I know.
It could be for Draconis.
But it says it in the fine print on the model registration. It's a Davian model, D for Davian.
I mean, the Battlemaster is known for being Davian, but it's not known for being an extremely ballistic heavy mech, so not always does Davian and autocannon meet, but only often. And this is one of those times where they don't.
And it's interesting you mentioned the Battlemaster, because this guy has a very similar loadout.
He's a mini Battlemaster. Battle Apprentice?
He's still got that standard engine. Now he's got 2 ER large lasers, 4 ER medium lasers, a Streak SRM-6, and a targeting computer.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I do like that Streak 6.
They're good weapons.
that weapons loadout with the targeting computer is just brutal, even with the heat issues. If he does alpha, you might almost melt yourself, but it's going to be worth it because you're going to hit him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he's got 14 double heat sinks, so 28 heat dissipation, but those ER large lasers do 12 each, so you fire both of those, you've got 4 left, so you can jump and not gain any heat, but the second you start shooting off your ER medium lasers, you run into heat management issues.
Which is our favorite thing.
That being said, with the 2 ER large lasers and that targeting computer, you could easily just pluck away at range until something's nice and soft and then close and finish it. There's almost no wrong way to use a guillotine on the battlefield, honestly.
Except alphaing. That's the wrong way to use a guillotine. 8D.
I mean, if you really need the enemy dead, and you know you're not going to die.
Well, you don't know you're not going to die, because an alpha for this guy, 48 heat plus movement, so that's 20 heat plus movement past what you can heat sink.
Okay, you might. It's in the fine print of the contract that you sign when you get the mech.
I guess you've got case and a standard engine, so even if the ammo does go up, you technically won't die.
Yeah.
You'll just be missing most of a mech.
Yeah.
I do think this guy wants to play as a bracket fighter, though.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
For sure.
Because those 4 ER mediums and the Streak SRM-6 totals 24 heat. The 2 ER large lasers total 24 heat, and you've got a jump of 4. So that means you can fire either set, your ERs and your mediums and your SRM, or your ER larges, and you can jump with both of those. But you can't do both.
And I think it really depends on whether you're trying to punch a big hole in something that has a lot of armor, in which case you might want to do the concentrated damage from the large lasers, or if you're just trying to catch the leg of some pesky light mech or find all the holes you've already made with the ER larges, and then you'll go with the massed firepower. Just go for I'm going to throw enough shots in your general direction. I'm going to hit you eventually, and it's going to hurt.
Yeah, but you can't force a knockdown with the ER larges because they only do 16 damage.
Yeah.
But with the ER mediums and the SRM-6, you could potentially get up to 32 damage. Force that stability roll.
Yeah, but it's a good mech regardless, and it's got a battle value of 1891 and a point value of 41. So that targeting computer really bumping it up quite a bit, along with that extra ER large laser. And of course, after that, we come to the 6WB, the Word of Blake model from 3068, and we have the traditional movement profile of 464. We've got an improved C3 in the head. It's got an LRM-15 in the center torso. It's got an ER medium laser in the right torso, an ER medium laser in the left torso, 2 ER medium lasers in the right arm, and 1 heavy PPC in the left arm. And then it's got 11 double heat sinks. So again, heat management is going to be a problem, but it's an interesting build, especially with that heavy PPC.
And it also uses a small cockpit, a compact gyro, and then it also has ferrofibrous armor. So they just pumped all their fancy tech into this bad boy. They're like, you know what? Guillotine's going to be our tech. And lo and behold, they made a really interesting machine.
That they did.
The Word of Blake seems to be the Nazi production or Ministry of production when it comes to tech, because they can't just produce nice, easy to maintain, easy to produce, low tech versions of anything. They gotta bling it out.
Everything has to be over engineered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do find it interesting that this guy has an LRM-15.
Yeah, that's a weird break with tradition.
I think it's mainly got to do with that heavy PPC. I think they're trying to shift its role from being more of a bracket fighter skirmisher to being more of a maneuverable heavy sniper with the heavy PPC and the LRM-15. Because with the heat sinks it's got, it can run and fire both the heavy and the LRM and not overheat.
And having a C3 input gets you a chance to get some targeting data from someone a little faster running out in front.
Yeah, I've fought this thing before. It's a pain in the butt.
Yeah, I think it's a good switch. I just find it interesting that they made the switch with this particular mech. Like, this is something I would expect to see a Thunderbolt Word of Blake design that has improved C3, because the Thunderbolt already traditionally has a heavy energy weapon and a heavy LRM launcher.
Mm-hmm. Well, This guy's got a battle value of 1672 and a point value of 43. The Word of Blake can't I keep flubbing that.
Can't leave well enough alone.
Yes, thank you. They made the 6WB2 in 3070, and this unit is surprise jump jets. It's got advanced jump jets. Keeps that C3 in the center torso, keeps the LRM, but it downgrades it to a 5 with a Artemis 4, keeps the ER medium laser in the right torso and left torso, and now it's got 2 light PPCs in the right arm, 1 light Gauss rifle in the left arm, and then we have 10 double heat sinks. We get the Endo Steel back, and this guy has a XL fusion engine.
So it is, I want to point out here that normally when we get a Word of Blake design with the number 2 after it, it's a post-Jihad design that's been retrofitted to use non-Word of Blake technology. But this is actually the second Word of Blake guillotine, which is a break from our traditional nomenclature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can tell because it's still got the improved C3. Sorry, you were saying, Chandler?
Definitely reinforces the sniper role by switching out some of the medium lasers for light PPCs and keep ditching the heavy PPC for light Gauss. It's definitely wanting to stay away and jump around, and it does.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to the damage profile of the original guillotines, because that light Gauss rifle has 8 points of damage, where a large laser has 8 points as well.
Mm-hmm.
It just pushes the medium lasers out by trading them up to light PPCs, and then swaps the SRM-6 to an LRM-5 with Artemis to push the missile damage from short range to long range.
Yeah, I definitely like this Word of Blake model a lot more than the previous one, and the surprise extra movement from the jump jets is not bad. I mean, I'd like it to be a 7 because of course numbers, but 6 jumping for a 70-ton mech is nothing to scoff at.
It's very good.
Yeah, and ditching the small cockpit definitely helps for non-Mane Domini pilots.
So it's got a battle value of 1635 and a point value of 37. And then we're going to take a break from the Word of Blake, and we're going to go to the Guillotine 2C2. This model's got a movement profile of 466. It's got Streak SRM-4 in the center torso, ER medium laser in the right torso, a ER medium laser in the left torso. It's got a targeting computer in the left torso, 2 ER medium lasers in the right arm, and 1 ER PPC in the left arm. It's got 16 double heat sinks, and it's got Ferro and Endo. So this is a nice bit of tech.
Yeah, the biggest changes here are downgrading the Streak 6 to a Streak 4, trading down the large pulse lasers to ER medium lasers, and bumping the jump profile up to 6. Oh, and adding a targeting computer.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of that tonnage is going.
Adds a little bit of armor, which is always nice. Not a lot, just a couple points.
Sometimes all you need is the 1 or 2 extra pips, right?
Yeah, it adds 25 points of armor, so not too much, but enough to make a little bit of a difference.
What I didn't realize is that the clans have improved jump jets.
Oh yeah.
I've never seen them on a clan mech before.
Yeah, they do. They just tend to only show up on their light mechs. Their heavier mechs, they tend to not use the fanciness.
Yeah, I mean, it's clan tech, so it's cheating, but this is a very nice... I like that 6 jump jets, the targeting computer. So you're breaking even, then you add in that targeting computer. So you should be 1 ahead of most opponents on your targeting number. So this guy wants to jump a lot.
See, he was first seen in 3070, and he's got a battle value of 2721 and a point value of 44. And then our last mech of the evening is going to be the Guillotine 6WB3. Goes back to the movement profile of 464, and we've got 11 double heat sinks. It's got Pharaoh, it's got the C3 Slave, and it's got Guardian ECM in the head. It's got that LRM-15 in the center torso, an ER medium laser in the right torso. The C3 Slave is in the left torso, along with a ER medium laser and 2 ER medium lasers in the right arm, and then the heavy PPC in the left arm, just like the previous model, the 2. And
well, no, this actually actually is the 6WB.
Yeah, the 6WB3 is a salvaged version of the 6WB, and they took out the C3I for the C3.
Right, of course, this is just
ECM.
after the jihad has ended, right?
Yep.
Had to find a way to use all those fantastic mechs they got all limits on, but no one wanted to use C3I because Stone said no.
Yeah, so it is a word of Blake mech, but it's a salvage.
Put that on a billboard.
That, I don't know how many people had manufacturing capabilities for C3I or spare parts.
I mean, at the very least, Ghost Bear did. So I'm assuming a couple people had an attempt. They could have figured it out.
For all its limitations, I think standard C3 with an ECM is better than C3I without ECM. So that's one of the reasons I like a lot of these salvaged Word of Blake mechs, because you go to a C3 slave and you add in that ECM to protect your targeting data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this model was given the official designation in 3080, and of course it is a catch-all for all the downgrades and retrofits and salvage and all of that. It's got a battle value of 1741 and a point value of 44.
It is interesting to me that in Alpha Strike, the Guillotine 2C2 and the Guillotine GLT 6WB3 has the exact same point value, but they're separated by almost 1,000 points of BV.
I mean, it is a different system.
Yeah, I've got a BV. It's like 1,800 BV difference. Granted, you've got a lot more firepower in the clan version for less heat, or actually, no, slightly less heat, and you've got the targeting computer, which bumps it up a ton.
Mm-hmm.
Just looking at the Alpha Strike cards, I'm thinking it's the ECM and the C3 that bumps the Guillotine WB3 up, because it's at least a point behind or 2 points behind on firepower. Its movement profile is worse. Its armor and structure are the same. So it's got to be the C3 and the ECM that are giving it that parity with the 2C.
Mm-hmm. Well, next we move on to our pilot profiles. Josh is going to start us off on that one.
First up, speaking of Comstar and the Word of Blake, we've got Demi-Presenter Christopher Knight. He is famous for cutting down a trio of pirates on the planet Polsbo, and that feat by a relatively fresh pilot with no well-known background gave rise to a lot of questions about how he was so good, and both Comstar and Knight claim that he is a recent graduate from Sandhurst. This should be noted, this pilot is in TRO 3039, so this is before the revelation that comm guards have a large military. So the fact that some jumped up security guard in a battle mech was able to wipe out 3 pirates with ease.
Not suspicious at all.
Yeah, has raised the FedCom's suspicions.
It's because Blake wills it. Blake guided my hand.
Well, our next pilot is Presenter Sarel. Sarel is a rank Omega Mani Dami, and records indicate that she commanded the 40th Shadow Division. They personally led the conquest of Hesperus II in 3070, piloting a 6WB, and Sorel delighted in hunting down insurgents. Autopsy reports show that as an Omega, Sorel had been augmented more than a regular Omega, and the Examiner described their body as a twisted mass of flesh and cybernetic implants.
Sounds like a pleasant person on all levels.
Yeah.
/ sarcasm.
Hard pass on a meet and greet.
Hail to the Omnissiah, I mean Blake.
And our last notable pilot is from the Free Worlds League. This is Captain Sienna Sterling, who seems to be a bit of an enigma. Off duty, most people would guess that she's a librarian. On duty, no one would mistake this extremely aggressive rising star for a wallflower. She's known for demanding excellence not just from herself, but from the people who follow her and from her superiors. The attitude she displays is borderline insubordinate, but the skill and precision her soldiers display gives her some latitude and keeps her chain of command from being too outraged by her demands for them to improve their standards of behavior. That said, her unit does prefer to surround, or tactically her unit prefers to surround an enemy force and use long-range weapons on them, while she and her command lance wade into the middle of their foes.
There you go.
I guess you can say that's the perks of being a wallflower.
So, for our data dive today, we are going to look at the next part of the Terran Hegemony. When we last left the fledgling Terran Hegemony, it had just finished the first campaign of Persuasion in 2317, but Director General McKenna was continuing to look past the previous borders of the Terran Alliance. He started the second campaign of Persuasion in 2320 and targeted terra firma, Capella, and Nanking. But as the HAF forces pushed past the old lines of the Terran Alliance, they continued to find more and more resistance. When you combine this with the fact that the HAF equipment was not yet up to the challenge both in quality and volume, a notable example is the aerospace fighters. The HAF had two categories of ships, one for space combat and one for atmospheric combat. While each was not a failure in the other environment, they were severely hampered. As a result, the HAF had insufficient cover for planetfall operations. This failure would be exploited by the enemy. So after capturing terra firma, Capella, and Nanking, the second campaign of Persuasion was paused in order to build up forces and equipment that would be needed to complete future operations. And for the next 10 years, that is what the Terran Hegemony did. They redefined and built up forces for an expansion of the Hegemony. Many planets since their abandonment or gift of freedom by the Terran Alliance had started to band together, be it for economic reasons, mutual defense, or had been brought under control of a rich or powerful family or company. The Terran Hegemony's outward aggression only helped galvanize these alliances. The most notable organizations of the time were the Merrick Commonwealth, the Federation of Orient, the Dominion of Regulus, the Federation of Sky, the Protectorate of Donegal, the Tamar Pact, the Crucis Pact, the Ozawa Mercantile Association, and the Capellan Republic. By 2330, James McKenna faced the issue of those now fledgling nations and how to deal with them. Seeing that while they could not support one another directly during a confrontation, the political optics of invading a coalition would become a protracted and grinding campaign, each victory cementing more and more resistance on other planets. And so the Director General changed gears and started to send out waves of ambassadors to each planet that was allied with others to establish diplomatic relations. This was done by revamping the Foreign Affairs Department, and the Director General noticeably toned down his rhetoric of Terra being the center of humanity. This, when paired with the economic export campaign mentioned in previous data dives, and the propaganda campaign that was poising the hegemony as the repository of all human knowledge and compassion. However, if you lived on a planet which was unaligned and independent, well, as far as James and the hegemony were concerned, your planet was fair game. The Samar ambush. Despite the second campaign of Persuasion being suspended indefinitely and in actuality ended, the HAF started its third campaign of Persuasion and picked up unaffiliated planets and independent systems in 2335. The events of one of these operations would become known as the Samar ambush. The majority of the third campaign took place in what is now considered traditional Steiner space, and more specifically the region known as the Isle of Skye. The two noteworthy planets are Samar and Galti, loosely aligned with each other as they had both been settled by a religious sect that held a anti-technology ethos. These planets lay inside the space claimed by the Federation of Skye, but both planets were not formal members, and the Federation tolerated the inhabitants' wishes to remain independent. And to the Terran hegemony, they were fair game, and James wanted them for they were resource-rich in water and minerals. Before the operation jumped to Galti, Director General James retired from the field, claiming poor health and passed command to his son, Admiral Conrad McKenna, who had been groomed, expected to take the Director Generalship when James retired. The hopes of a bright future on Conrad turned out to be a false light. When Conrad assumed command, he broke operational protocol, believing that the anti-technology sentiment meant that Galti would be a soft and easy target. This This proved to be incorrect, as the population was more than willing to arm themselves with, air quotes here, primitive slug throwers and other effective but considered out-of-date weapon systems, and take part in guerrilla tactics, resulting in a bloody year-long operation to pacify the planet. Admiral Conrad showed what type of man he was and equivocated and blamed Troop Command. Having finished operations on Galti, the HAF forces gathered and prepared to jump to Samar. This was when Conrad made his second and much more serious error. He again broke operational protocol and deemed it safe to jump his troops in at the same time as the warships and have the second wave jump in without confirmation from the first. The rationale for this action was to save time and that the planet's population would have no space defense as they were anti-technology. This, as with Galti, proved to be a grave error, for as the HAF had been tied down in Galti, Samar had gotten word and reached out to the Federation of Sky for help. The Federation, not wishing to incur the Terran Hegemony's wrath, did not directly support Samar, but provided them with mines and sleeper heat-seeking missiles to seed the jump points for defense. As you can imagine, when you add these two facts together, the HAF plan was immediately destroyed by the enemy. The warships were armored sufficiently that they did survive the jump unless they jumped into the same space as a mine, but the troop transports were vulnerable targets to the mines and the missiles. Out of the 31 troop transports, only 2 survived the jump, and the survivors had to scramble to clear the debris field and jump area before the second wave arrived. Most did, but the second wave of jump ships arriving resulted in the loss of another 6 ships. The effect of the ambush stopped any chance of securing the planet, and invasion force was effectively no longer existent. With the invasion stopped dead, Conrad did what any intelligent military commander would do. He set up a court-martial with himself as the prosecutor and judge and blamed everything on the first wave commander. That was sarcasm for those in the back. Stupefyingly, the sham went on for 3 weeks and was so mishandled that reports say that multiple groups of personnel, independent from each other, had decided to mutiny if the admiral was found guilty. Fortunately for all involved, no verdict was ever reached, as the Black Lion jumped into the system a day before the trial was scheduled to conclude. After receiving multiple reports of the utter incompetence of his son, James left Terra to resolve the situation and bring his incompetent admiral/son out of harm's way. James apologized to the surviving members of the HAF and stripped his son of all ranks and privileges, then returned with the HAF forces to Terran Hegemony space. The last ship to leave Samar was the Black Lion, who jumped 3 hours after all the others. No official reason was given for this, but I believe that it was the act of a man who was struggling to find a solution and coming to terms with what would come after him, and his failings to meet the challenges with his successor.
I wouldn't be surprised if he was also paying his respects to the men and women who died because of the incompetence of his son, the man he put in charge of them.
He strikes me as that kind of man. When news of the events at the jump point of Samar reached the population of the Terran Hegemony, it was faced with a political crisis. Much of the old factionalism resurfaced, and the events drove a wedge between the Navy and the Army. The tension continued to escalate as James refused to prosecute his son for his actions and incompetence. When tensions were likely at their zenith and about to boil over, that is when James made his final address. Sadly, we do not have a record of the transcript, but we do know the content. He eloquently and passionately explained that he understood the necessity of prosecuting Conrad for the actions that resulted in the Samar ambush, but was unable to separate that Conrad was his son. Torn by this conflicting duty to family and realm, he was forced with only one real choice he could make: retirement. The population was touched by his open and honest address and were won over, and the tension subsided. It is my honest hope that James enjoyed and made full use of his retirement, as 10 days after his address he passed from cancer. Now, this is the official stance of On the Origin of Battlemechs podcast. Cancer.
Indeed.
Bad times.
With no clear successor to the Director Generalship of the Hegemony, or more accurately, the High Council had to find a worthy replacement for James. Obviously, his son was not an option, and most of his extended family were disqualified for any number of legitimate reasons, and some suspect. The council settled on two options: Graham Nellis, James's nephew, or Michael Cameron, James' third cousin. Both were qualified for the position, but ultimately Michael would be chosen for the position. Reasons given at the time were his intelligence and personality. This is where we're going to leave off today, with Michael Cameron being selected for the Director Generalship.
And nothing could ever go wrong now that we have a Cameron in charge.
Yes, now we start the air quote golden age, right?
Yes.
Hear the tears of the periphery in the background. Also some nuclear bomb.
I'm actually on the reunification war part, my other thing right now, reading through it. Camerons are cancer.
That is what he died of. He died of Cameron. Sorry, sir, you've got a terrible case of Cameron.
Our sources for today are Sarna, Battletech Battlemech Manual, Master Unit List, TRO and RS Succession Wars, TRO 3050, TRO 3060, 3050 Record Sheet, and the Star League Sourcebook.
I read 2 pilot profiles out of TRO 3039.
We are supported by the community at patreon.com/on the Origin of Battlemechs. Our Twitter is at Origin of Mechs. Our email is ontheoriginofbattlemechs@gmail.com. Please leave a review and tell your friends about us. Word of mouth is the best PR. Special thanks to my friend Laura for recording the intro and outro. Class dismissed. Everybody have a great day.
Peace out, mech warriors.
Stay safe out there.
Module complete. System standby. Would you like to load the next module?